Sarah left him 3 times, but on the 4th week, the same thing happened. She would go through a cycle of anxiety and rumination, and then she would find she was thinking of a sweet memory of him, and she felt compelled to get back in contact with him. This is how the cycle repeated over and over again for Sarah. The interesting part about this is that she wasn't really going back to him. What she was going back to was a chemical state inside of her body that made her feel safe again. There are 3 mechanisms to this cycle. The first one is trauma bonding conditioning. Intermittent reinforcement, we know, causes massive spikes in dopamine. The cortisol inside of you will stabilize upon the return to the abuser. This isn't a moral issue. This is a physiological issue. Your central nervous system starts to tag them as the cortisol regulator. Of course, they're not, and all of this is taking place inside of the narcissistic shared fantasy space, and they're more than happy, the narcissistic abuser, for you to see them as something they are not, safety, when in fact, they're the most dangerous person you could be around. So why does someone who's strong, intelligent, and careful fall prey to this mechanism again and again? That's what we need to understand in mechanism number 2. Mechanism number 2 is introject hijacking. There is a part of our minds that tells us how to act in the world that makes us a good person or a bad person. You can think of it as your conscience. The narcissistically abusive relationship hijacks that part of you and starts to distort reality from fiction and right from wrong. The narcissist installs self-image fragments into the target, and the target then feels compelled to police their own actions, beliefs, and feelings on behalf of the abuser. You return to the abuser believing that they can make you feel safe again. You return to the abuser to get relief from the version of them that is living inside of your head. You're not breaking your boundaries. What you're doing is you're obeying the boundaries that the narcissistic abuser has set for you, and this can happen long after they're gone. And we need to understand that so that we can break this cycle once and for all. Mechanism number 3 is boundary erosion through the enforcement of roles. You've been covertly assigned a role. Mother, father, rescuer, caretaker, whatever it is. When you fall outside of that role, you receive pain. When you fall inside of that role, you receive pleasure. Your boundaries will slowly adapt to match that unconscious role across time. When you leave the relationship, the pain that you feel is a kind of a role void. You've been so used to playing that role for so long and felt on some level comfortable there that when you have the void of the role there, you feel stress, you feel a lot of cognitive dissonance. This void is what pulls you back in. If you don't understand the role that you were assigned, you'll just repeat this cycle again and again, either with the same person or you'll choose somebody else to play it out with. But you will keep playing this role by its rules within that game unless you look at it directly, dissect it, and pull it apart carefully piece by piece. And that's what we need to do. So what is the real reason that intelligent, successful, and smart people return to an abuser? The real reason you return is due to system instability. If you think of the entity that you are as a system, and the system craves coherence and it moves away from fractionation, you are craving coherence, you're craving stability. And when there's instability, you'll do anything to stop it. You'll do anything to move away from that. The leaving of that person, it creates a huge amount of stress and a huge amount of systemic instability. And the voice in your head will say, this is the only guy who ever understood me. This is the woman who loved me the most, and nobody will ever love me like this woman does ever again. That's the fantasy version that you've been fed by the narcissistic abuser. It's not true. These things that feel like rumination and anxiety, they are, but they should also be seen as withdrawal symptoms. It's important to understand that this pain isn't love. It's role void and systemic instability that's creating internal stress. It's not love, it's conditioning, and we need to learn how to break it. Now, willpower is not going to be enough here. You can't outthink a nervous system that's been entrained into this role and into this game across time. It just doesn't work like that. You must reestablish boundary integrity at the cognitive, emotional, and physiological levels in order to break free from this. If you don't do this, the loop will continue of its own accord repeatedly and unconsciously. And we all know that we don't want that, don't we? In a few days' time, I'll be releasing the Boundary Reset course. This is a short but deep, no fluff, very practical program that allows you to reestablish your boundaries and reestablish your self-worth and the capacity to tell right from wrong, and bringing back your capacity to say no. It will show you exactly how to rebuild the boundary system that the narcissistic relationship has eroded. If you want the early sessions, the worksheets, and the weekly live Q&As, please make sure you're subscribed to our community over on richardgrannon.com. The people who succeed in recovery are the ones who plan and prepare and measure. If you can measure it, you can control it. So make sure you have an effective plan for dealing with this problem. And it must be within a structure, and it must be delivered in a step-by-step way. If you're interested, please go and subscribe over in our community so you don't miss out. So what is the key to moving on from this kind of a loop? I think the most important thing is the attitude with which we approach it. So you should have an attitude that is curious and has a good sense of humor, where you're not persecuting yourself and beating yourself up for making a mistake, where you just look at it with a wry smile and be prepared to be detached, be somewhat analytical, and then to go back into your body and feel the feelings that need to be felt, and to understand you're not broken and this isn't permanent. It was conditioned into you, and it can just as easily be conditioned out of you. The thing is to remember is that at this point, as far as I'm aware, I've helped thousands of people to do this over the last 14 years, and it can be done. I think if you believe it can't be done, that's one of the big stumbling blocks that people face. And that's all part of the narcissistic shared fantasy. That's the narcissists interject and their rules. You'll never have a love like mine again. You'll never experience anything like this again. And you'll always be doomed to just live with this wound inside of you. I don't agree with that. And I don't believe that that's true. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Thank you.